All right, I want to try a little experiment with you. Just for a second. Close your eyes. Unless, you're driving, in which case, please do not close your eyes.
Please don't.
But imagine you're walking through a modern zoo. You've got your popcorn. You can hear kids yelling in the distance, and you walk up to the lion enclosure. You see the lion. It's probably just sleeping on a big heated rock.
As they usually are.
Exactly. And then you look down at that little plastic sign, that placard on the railing. What does it tell you?
Well, it's going to be a data sheet, isn't it? It'll say Panthera leo. It'll list the habitat, sub-Saharan Africa, the diet carnivore, conservation status vulnerable.
It's all very clinical.
It's a very factual summary of the biological machine that you're looking at.
The biological machine, that's a great way to put it. It's data. It's biology. We look at that lion and we see a creature that evolves over millions of years, an apex predator that fits into a very specific ecological niche. But, and this is the real pivot point for our whole deep dive today, if you were a person living in England in, say, the year 1200, and you looked at a lion, or let's be honest, you'd be looking at a picture of a lion in a book.
Much more likely, yes.
You wouldn't see biology. You wouldn't see an evolved predator. You would see a sentence.
That is such a powerful way to put it. You really would. You wouldn't be looking at an organism. You'd be reading a message, a text written by God himself.
So today on the deep dive, we are going to try and completely rewire how we look at the natural world. We're stepping out of the 21st century. We're trying to shed our scientific materialism, and we're stepping into the medieval mindset.
It's a world where nature wasn't a system to be categorized. It was a book to be read. The Liber Naturae, the book of nature.
A concept that feels so, almost alien to us now.
It is, but for 1,000 years, it was the dominant way of understanding reality. The basic idea was that God wrote 2 books. The first, well, that was the Bible, obviously, the scriptures. But the second book was creation itself. Every single creature, from the tiniest little ant to the biggest, most massive elephant, was a word, or maybe a symbol. And it was designed specifically to teach humanity a moral or a theological lesson.
So nothing in nature just is. Everything means something.
Precisely. It's all intentional. So if a pelican is seen feeding its young, that's not just instinct. To the medieval mind, it's a deliberate act of theater. It's a performance staged for our benefit to explain the concept of Christ's sacrifice.
Wow. So to guide us through this incredibly dense, symbolic world, we are looking at a stack of sources that center on something called a bestiary.
The Book of Beasts.
And specifically, we are doing a deep dive into what is maybe the most famous one of all, the Ashmole Bestiary. This isn't just any old book. This is a celebrity of the medieval manuscript world.
It really is. It's this lavish gold-leafed manuscript from the late 12th or maybe early 13th century, and it's housed today in the Bodleian Library at Oxford.
And when you say lavish, you mean it.
Oh, it is the Rolls-Royce of bestiaries. It belongs to what scholars call the second family of bestiaries, which we can get into. But what makes the Ashmole so special is really the quality of the art. The illuminations are just stunning. We're talking vivid colors, gold backgrounds. It was very clearly made for someone with a lot of money and, frankly, a lot of taste.
But we're not just going to look at the pretty pictures today. We are digging into some really fascinating research, particularly by a scholar named Liam Lewis, that challenges how we usually approach these books.
Right, because normally we just look at them. We treat them as visual art.
Exactly. But Lewis argues that the text itself, the words on the page, are actually obsessed with 2 other senses, sound and smell.
Which introduces this concept of Umwelt.
Umwelt.
Gesundheit.
Thank you. It's a German term, and it was coined by the biologist Jakob von Uexküll back in the early 20th century. It translates, roughly to environment or surround world.
But it's not the same as an ecosystem, right? Not at all. It refers to the self-centered sensory bubble that every single organism lives in. It's their unique perceptual world.
So my Umwelt is different from, say, my dog's Umwelt.
Completely different. You perceive the world primarily through, color and complex language. Your dog perceives the world through this incredible landscape of smells that you can't even begin to imagine. The Umwelt is the world as the animal experiences it.
And the argument is that these medieval monks were already thinking this way.
That's what's so shocking. These monks who had zero training in modern biology were writing these bestiaries with this incredibly keen focus focus on the animal's sensory experience.
Right.
How does a lion hear a hunter? How does a mermaid use sound as a weapon, as a trap?
So our mission today is to explore this medieval acoustic. We're going to look at the lion, the mermaid, the elephant, and of course the unicorn. But before we get to the beasts themselves, we have to understand the book. What exactly is a bestiary? Because I think most people hear that word and they imagine, I don't know, a Dungeons and Dragons monster manual.
You know, that's honestly not a terrible comparison in terms of format, but the purpose is completely different.
Yeah.
A monster manual is there to help you kill the monster.
Right, gives you the stats, armor class, hit points.
A bestiary is there to help you save your soul.
Okay, that's a pretty big difference. So let's trace the lineage. Where did this all start? Because these books didn't just pop up out of nowhere in medieval England.
No, not at all. The roots are much, much older. The great-grandfather of all European bestiaries is a text called the Physiologus.
The Physiologus, and that translates to something like the naturalist.
Roughly, yes. Or the one who knows nature. It was originally written in Greek in Alexandria, Egypt, probably around the 2nd or 3rd century AD.
And Alexandria is crucial here, right? We're not talking about some backwater. This was the intellectual capital of the ancient world. The great library was there.
It was this incredible melting pot. I mean, you had Greek philosophy, Roman pragmatism, ancient Egyptian mysticism, and this new, vibrant, early Christian theology all sort of bubbling together in the same city.
A real intellectual crossroads.
Absolutely. And the anonymous author of the Physiologus just soaked it all up. He took all these ancient folklore stories, stuff from Herodotus, Aristotle, Pliny the Elder, and he fused them with Christian allegory.
Okay, so who is Pliny the Elder in this context? I always picture him as the ultimate cataloger, just writing everything down.
He was. Pliny wrote the Naturalis Historia, the natural history, and he genuinely tried to write down everything known about the natural world. But, and this is the important part, he wasn't fact-checking in the modern sense.
Not at all.
If a traveler came back from a long journey and told him, in India, there are ants as big as dogs and they dig for gold, Pliny wrote it down.
Source. Trust me, bro.
It was basically that, yes.
Yeah.
So the Physiologus takes these facts, some of which are real, some are wild rumors, and it gives each one of them a Christian job to do.
I love that. A Christian job.
Scholars have this wonderful metaphor for how a bestiary is constructed. They say it's built of bricks and mortar.
Okay, I like a good construction metaphor. Break that down for me. What are the bricks?
The bricks are the observations or the bits of lore about the animal. So, for example, the pelican pecks its own chest to feed its young with its blood. That is a brick. It's presented as a statement of fact.
A fact that's doing a lot of heavy lifting there. Pelicans don't actually do that, do they?
No, they don't. It probably came from someone observing a Dalmatian pelican, which gets a reddish patch on its chest during breeding season. Or maybe just the way they press their long bills against their chests to regurgitate food. To an ancient observer, it looked like self-sacrifice.
Okay, so that's the brick. What's the mortar?
The mortar is the allegory. It's the religious meaning that holds the bride in place and gives it purpose.
The so what?
Exactly. The mortar is. Just as the pelican revives its young with its own blood, so Christ redeems humanity with his blood on the cross. Without the mortar, the brick is just a weird piece of trivia about a bird. But without the brick, the mortar is just abstract theology. You need both to build the bestiary entry.
And so these books travel from Alexandria, across the Mediterranean, up into Europe. They get translated into Latin. They get copied and recopied.
And eventually we get to the second family in England in the 12th century.
What does second family mean? Is that like a mafia term, the Bestiary Corleones?
It's the taxonomy that scholars use for the manuscripts.
Yeah.
In the 12th century, especially in England, there was just this explosion of interest in these books. So the second family bestiaries, like the Ashmole, they expanded the content in a huge way.
So more animals?
More animals, more sources. They started incorporating writers like Isidore of Seville and his etymologies, and they standardized the order of the creatures.
Right. The Ashmole has a very specific flow to it. It starts with beasts, then it goes to birds, then reptiles, fish.
Mostly, yes.
Yeah.
Though, as you probably noticed in the sources, their idea of classification was, well, it was fluid.
Fluid is a very polite word. They have bees listed as a type of bird.
Well, they fly, don't they? If it flies, it's a bird. If it swims, it's a fish. Their system was based on locomotion and habitat, not genetics. That's why you'll often see crocodiles or even beavers classified with fish and bats with birds. It just made sense to them.
We have to talk about the audience for these books. You said the Ashmole is covered in gold leaf. This clearly wasn't a paperback you picked up at the medieval equivalent of an airport bookstore.
Not at all. Primarily, the audience was the monastic community. Monks. They would use these stories and the allegories in their sermons.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Imagine you're a monk in a cold stone church, and you're trying to explain a really abstract concept, like the resurrection, to a congregation of, mostly illiterate farmers. It's a hard concept.
Very hard.
But if you stand up and say, you all know the lion, the king of beasts, right? Well, let me tell you a story about how he wakes his cubs. Suddenly, everyone is leaning in. Everyone is listening.
It's a narrative hook.
It's a powerful visual and narrative hook. But something as high-end as the Ashmole Bestiary. It almost certainly had a wealthy lay patron, maybe a noble family who wanted to be part of this learned brotherhood. It was a coffee table book for the medieval elite, a status symbol.
I do want to push back on one thing, though, because it's an easy trap to fall into. We look at these books and we'll get to the elephant with no knees later, and it's so easy to just think, wow, people back then were just stupid.
Gullible.
Gullible, yeah. They believed anything. Is that a fair assessment?
It's deeply unfair, and it completely misses the point of the entire genre. They weren't failed scientists. They were successful moralists. You have to think of these huge intellectual figures of the time, like St. Ambrose or Hugh of St. Victor. They explicitly taught that the physical world is a shadow of the spiritual truth.
So if I went back in time and said, excuse me, Mr. Monk, but bears don't actually lick their unformed cubs into shape, he would say.
He would look at you with pity and say, my son, you are missing the point entirely. He might say, whether the bear physically does it is far less important than the divine truth it reveals about conversion, how God, through baptism, licks our own formless souls into a Christian shape.
The moral validity was more important than the biological accuracy.
It superseded it completely. They weren't checking facts, they were checking meanings.
That is such a massive paradigm shift. It's prioritizing the why over the what.
Perfectly said. And that brings us right to our first animal, the king. The bestiary almost always opens with the lion.
Leo, the Ashmole manuscript has some incredible illustrations of lions. They look so regal, sometimes a little manic, maybe.
A little wild-eyed, yeah.
But the text describes three natures of the lion. We're going to focus on the first two because they really highlight this umwelt idea, this whole sensory world.
Yes. The first nature of the lion involves a hunt. The story goes like this. The lion is standing on a high mountain or a hill. He's patrolling his territory. And then he perceives that a hunter is coming for him.
Okay, how does he perceive him? This is the crucial part, right?
This is where Lewis's analysis of the umwelt gets really granular and fascinating. The text doesn't just say the lion sees the hunter and hides. It sets up this really interesting hierarchy of the senses.
Oh, okay.
The hunter is completely trapped in the visual world. He's obsessed with the vestigia, which is the Latin for footprints or tracks. He's looking down at the ground, trying to read the story there.
He's a visual tracker. Makes sense.
Exactly. But the lion isn't operating on that visual plane. The lion is operating in an acoustic and an olfactory sphere. The text specifically says the lion smells the hunter from afar or hears his approach. So the lion perceives the hunter long before the hunter can ever see the lion.
It's almost like a battle between modern stealth technology. It's like radar versus optics.
That's a fantastic analogy. And because the lion knows that the hunter is relying on sight on the tracks, what does the lion do? He uses his tail like a broom to wipe them away. It's a deliberate act of counter-surveillance.
Wait, does the medieval text actually credit the animal with that level of strategic thinking? Or is that us projecting a modern idea back onto it?
That's the great debate. But the Ashmole text and its relatives use these very active intentional verbs. It implies the lion knows what the hunter is looking for and acts to thwart him. It suggests that medieval people didn't see animals as just dumb beasts, but as creatures with a sensible soul, capable of outsmarting humans by switching the sensory channel.
And the allegory here, the mortar holding this brick in place.
The lion is Christ, of course, and the hunter is the devil. Just as the lion covers his tracks on the mountain to hide from the hunter, Christ covered his tracks when he descended from heaven to earth.
He concealed his divinity.
He concealed his divinity, hiding it within a human body so that the devil wouldn't know who he truly was until it was too late. The cross wasn't a defeat. It was the final move in the trap.
That is some high-stakes espionage theology right there.
It really is. It frames the entire incarnation as a kind of divine covert op.
Okay, let's move to the second nature of the lion. This is probably the most famous one. It deals with the resurrection, and this is where sound becomes literally life-giving.
This is the absolute classic bestiary story. The text says that lion cubs are born dead.
Dead. Not just like in a deep sleep or something.
The Latin, mortuus, usually implies lifelessness. They are born as these inert lumps of flesh. They don't move, they don't breathe.
Okay.
But on the third day, the father lion arrives.
Yeah.
He stands over his dead cubs. And he either breathes in their faces, or in some versions, he lets out a mighty roar over them. And this sound, this acoustic event, wakes them up. It brings them to life.
Well, the third day, waking up from death, it doesn't get more direct than that as a symbol for the resurrection.
It is clear as day. But let's look at the sound itself for a second. The Middle English versions use the word rem for the roar. It's a powerful, resonant cry. Lewis's argument is that this isn't just a noise, it's what he calls a sound milieu.
A sound milieu. What does that mean in this context?
It means the sound isn't just a byproduct. It's an active force that creates a relationship. In the first story, the lion and the hunter are enemies, a negative relationship based on avoidance. But here, the father and the cub are intimately connected by the roar.
The sound is a bridge between them.
It's a bridge that life travels across. The sound moves from the living father to the dead cub, and it transfers life itself. It functions almost like a divine command, a creative force.
It reminds me of the Genesis creation story. God speaks the world into existence, let there be light. It's not a physical act, it's an acoustic one. The lion roars life into the cub.
That is the perfect parallel. It's the creative power of the voice, of the word. And for that medieval listener sitting in that cold church, hearing the priest describe this, maybe even imitate the roar, it makes the abstract idea of Jesus rose from the dead feel visceral. It's something that vibrates in your chest.
So the lion gives us sound as life. But now we have to pivot to the dark side of that coin. We have to talk about a creature that uses sound as a deadly weapon.
We have to talk about the mermaid.
Or the siren. The terminology seems to drift a bit in the sources.
It does. There's some confusion there.
The illustration in the Ashmole manuscript is just fascinating because, well, let's describe it. It is absolutely not the Disney version of Ariel.
No, not at all. In the Ashmole, she has the upper body of a maiden. Her hair is long and loose. She's often holding a comb or a mirror or sometimes a fish, which is a symbol of luxury or lust.
Okay.
And then the bottom half is a fishtail. But what's so interesting is if you go back to the original physiologus and the Greek myths, sirens were actually birds.
Birds, like harpies.
Exactly,
Yeah.
bird women. And some of the other medieval bestiaries show this bizarre hybrid creature, maybe a woman's torso with falcon feet, but also a fishtail. It shows that the artists were often just confused. They were drawing something based on verbal description or copying a copy of a copy, and the details got muddled.
But the Ashmole version settles on the classic fishwoman. And the text says she lives in unstable places.
Yes, places where the water sinks or subsides. It's a metaphor for moral instability, for treacherous ground. But her primary weapon, her defining feature, is her voice.
Right.
The text says she sings sweetly with many voices. The Middle English is many deafness.
Many voices. That's such a creepy little detail. It's not a solo. It's a whole choir coming from one throat.
And it implies deception, doesn't it? It implies duplicity. A truthful, honest person has one voice. A hypocrite or a liar has many voices. They say one thing and mean another.
And the effect on the sailor is just devastating.
The sailor hears this enchanting song. He's lulled into a state of slumber. He forgets his steering, his duty, his very purpose. The ship crashes on the rocks and he is destroyed.
So let's compare this directly to the lion. The lion's roar wakes the dead. The mermaid's song puts the living to sleep.
That is the perfect structural contrast. The sound milieu here creates what Lewis calls a negative relationality. It's a trap. It doesn't give life. It takes away the sailor's agency. It creates a loss of self.
We can't really ignore the heavy gender component here, can we? I mean, it's pretty blatant that the dangerous, irrational sound is female and the rational, life-giving, divine sound is male.
Oh, absolutely not. The bestiary is a product of its time, and its time was deeply misogynistic. The medieval church often associated the female voice with seduction, with danger, with the irrational passions of the body.
So her song is contrasted with the word of God.
Exactly. Logos versus song. Logic versus emotion. It's a very old trope. The text basically boils down to a warning. Don't listen to her.
What's the moral then?
The moral is about hypocrisy. The mermaid represents those people who speak beautifully, who seem righteous, but are wolves inside. And the only way for the wise man to survive is through sensory management.
Sensory management, I like that.
It's the story of Odysseus and the sirens, which the medieval authors knew. You have to plug your ears with wax. You have to literally cut off the sense of hearing to save your soul. It's a profound warning. Your senses are the gates to your soul, and if you leave them unguarded, the devil will just swim right in.
That's actually a really practical piece of advice, even for today. Don't read the comments section. Don't doom scroll on social media.
It is the exact same principle. You have to guard your inputs, protect your mind.
So with the mermaid, we have sound being used as a weapon of isolation. The sailor dies alone, separated from his crew, from his purpose. But when we turn the page in the Bestiary to the elephant, the role of sound flips 180 degrees again.
It really does. Because while the mermaid story is all about deadly isolation, the elephant story is entirely about community, and specifically community in a moment of crisis.
This brings us to one of the most elaborate and frankly one of the most heartbreaking stories in the entire manuscript. But first, we have to address the brick, the central fact that the Bestiary builds this whole allegory on, and it is a doozy.
It certainly is.
The Bestiary claims that the elephant has no knee joints.
The kneeless elephant. It is one of the most persistent and strangest myths in the entire history of zoology.
Okay, hang on. No knees. I have to stop you there. Because the Romans used elephants in warfare. Hannibal famously crossed the Alps with elephants. People in the ancient world knew what elephants looked like and how they moved. How does a book from the 1200s get away with saying they have no knees?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it really speaks to how information traveled, or more accurately, didn't travel in the Middle Ages. You're right, the Romans knew. But after the fall of the Roman Empire, that direct contact with African and Asian fauna was largely cut off for most of Northern Europe.
So they're just playing a game of telephone with old texts.
A 1,000-year game of telephone. Some ancient text says the elephant has legs like columns. A monk reads columns and thinks rigid, unbending. Therefore, no knees. And once it's written down in a jagged Latin script by a respected authority like Isidore of Seville, it becomes gospel truth.
Even if it makes no logical or biological sense whatsoever.
Especially if it makes no sense. Because if nature is weird and counterintuitive, that just proves how creative and mysterious God is.
Yeah.
But think about the physics of that for a second. If you're a hunter and you believe this giant animal has no knees, how on earth do you catch it?
Well, you can't trip it, that's for sure.
Exactly. You have to wait for it to sleep. And since it can't bend its legs to lie down, it has to sleep standing up, leaning against a big sturdy tree.
Oh, I see where this is going. It's a trap.
It's a trap. The hunter, here he is again, the antagonist, finds the elephant's favorite sleeping tree. He takes out a saw and he cuts the trunk halfway through.
That's just cruel.
It is. The elephant comes along at the end of the day, tired, leans against its trusted tree, SNMP.
Timber.
Down goes the elephant. And because he has no knees, he is completely and utterly helpless. He's like a fallen statue, a toppled monument. He can't get up.
That sounds absolutely terrifying for the elephant. It's a position of total vulnerability and shame.
It is. But this is where the story shifts. This leads to the rescue, which is where the sound milieu comes back in a really unique and powerful way. The fallen elephant, lying on its side, begins to call for help. The text uses words like weep and roar. It's a cry of deep distress.
And who answers the call?
At first, a single great elephant appears. He tries to lift the fallen one, but he can't. He's not strong enough. So then he leaves and he comes back with 12 other elephants.
12. That number is never an accident in these texts.
Never. The 12 elephants represent the 12 prophets of the Old Testament. They all arrive, they see their fallen brother, and they all try to lift him. But even together, they can't do it.
So what do?
They join the chorus. The text describes a great blast like horns or bells. They all roar together up to heaven. It's this cacophony of shared grief and helplessness, a communal cry.
And then what happens?
Then a small young elephant arrives on the scene. The text emphasizes that he is very small. And this insignificant little elephant walks up, puts his trunk under the big fallen one, the great elephant, and effortlessly lifts him to his feet.
The little guy succeeds where the 12 big ones fail. Okay, hit me with the mortar. Unpack this allegory for me.
It's the entire story of the fall and redemption of man. The great fallen elephant is Adam, and by extension, all of humanity. We fell because of a tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden. And on our own, we are helpless, unable to rise from the state of sin.
And the 12 elephants who try and fail.
They are the prophets, the law of the Old Testament. They came, they taught, they cried out to God, but they lack the power to truly lift humanity from the curse of original sin.
And the small, unassuming elephant who finally succeeds?
That is Christ, the new Adam. He who was great has humbled himself, became small, That is, he became human, and he alone has the power to lift us up, to grant us salvation.
That is surprisingly complex and really touching.
It really is. And if we look at the umwelt aspect of it, the sensory world, the Lewis article points out something brilliant here. In the lion story, the hunter is present in the sensory world. In the mermaid story, the sailor is present. But in this elephant rescue scene,
the hunter is gone. He's not mentioned at all during the rescue. He sawed the tree and he left.
Exactly. The hunter causes the fall, but then he completely disappears from the narrative. The sound, this massive communal roaring of the 12 elephants, is entirely among the elephants. It's a community distress signal, a shared experience.
It's a shared language of grief.
Yes. The text uses words like remen and beret to describe the sounds. It represents this collective cry to the divine. It's not a sound that's meant for human ears. It's a sound meant for God. It gives the elephants this rich social life and emotional depth that's really striking.
It really is. You genuinely feel for them. It's a community rallying around a fallen member. And it acknowledges that animals have their own conversations, their own tragedies, their own dramas that have nothing to do with us humans.
Which is a very humble and surprising perspective for such a human-centric worldview to take.
I want to pivot now to a creature that, unlike the elephant, we know is mythical. But to the people reading the Bestiary, it was probably just as real. The unicorn.
The unicorn, the absolute superstar of the Bestiary.
But we need to scrub our brains of the modern Lisa Frank, glittery, rainbow-maned pony image. The medieval unicorn was not cute.
Not even a little bit.
Yeah.
To understand the medieval unicorn, we have to go all the way back to a Greek physician named Ctesias, who was writing around 400 BC. He wasn't writing a fairy tale. He was writing a travelogue of India. A place, by the way, he'd never actually been.
Red flag number one.
A very big red flag. He's just collecting stories from travelers and merchants. And he describes this creature called the onager, or the wild ass of India. But listen to this description. It has a body as white as snow, a dark red head, and piercing blue eyes.
That already sounds like some kind of nightmarish creature.
It gets stranger. He says the horn isn't white. It's a tricolor horn. It's white at the base, it's pitch black in the middle, and it has a vivid crimson pointed tip. And he says this animal is so incredibly fast and so violent that it is impossible to capture alive.
Okay, so historians look at that description, the speed, the aggression, the single horn on the snout, and they usually land on one suspect.
The Indian rhinoceros. It's the leading theory. If you describe a rhino to someone who has only ever seen a horse, and then that person describes it to a monk 500 years later, you can see how the thick, leathery armor becomes a white coat, and the horn gets longer and more elegant in the telling.
But that's still a massive leap. How do we get from a violent, aggressive, tricolor rhino donkey to the ultimate symbol of purity and Christ?
The mortar of Allegory transformed it completely. The ferocity remained, but it became a symbol of untamable spiritual power. The text says the unicorn is too strong and too swift for any hunter. So the question becomes, how do you catch the uncatchable beast?
You use a very specific kind of trap, a very human kind of trap.
Use the virgin trap. The hunters would find a pure maiden, a virgin, and they would leave her alone in the forest where the unicorn lived. The unicorn, sensing her purity, maybe smelling it, in its umwelt, would be drawn to her.
It becomes docile.
All its ferocity just melts away. It approaches her gently, it lays its head in her lap, and it falls asleep.
It's an image of total submission, of total vulnerability.
And then the hunters, who've been hiding in the bushes, jump out, and they either capture it or, more often, they kill it.
It's actually a really dark story when you think about it that way. It's a betrayal. The maiden is used as bait.
It is, but the allegory completely flips it. The unicorn is Christ, fierce and untamable by evil. The maiden is the Virgin Mary. The unicorn coming to rest in her lap symbolizes the incarnation God becoming human through Mary's womb, making himself vulnerable.
And the hunter's killing it while it's helpless.
That's not a tragedy. That's the crucifixion. It's the necessary sacrifice for the salvation of mankind.
Wow. So the hunt is reframed as the central act of the divine plan.
Precisely. This whole narrative is depicted famously in the unicorn tapestries, which are at the Met Cloisters in New York. If you ever get a chance to see them, look closely. The unicorn is often shown bleeding or trapped, but it always has this serene, peaceful look on its face. It has submitted to its fate.
I have to ask about the horns, because people in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance were buying unicorn horns for astronomical prices. Kings had them, popes had them. What were they actually buying?
They were buying narwhal tusks.
Of course.
Traders from the North Vikings and their descendants essentially would bring these long, spiraled ivory tusks down from the Arctic. They looked exactly like what people imagined a unicorn horn should be. It was the perfect physical evidence to validate the myth.
It's just amazing how all the pieces fit together. You have the ancient rumor of the rhino, you have the theological need for a symbol of Christ's incarnation, and then you have the physical object of the narwhal tusk washing up on a shore in Norway.
Bricks and mortar. The narwhal tusk is a very powerful, very expensive brick. The theology is the mortar. And together they built a creature that felt so real to people, it lasted for centuries.
Now, we've been talking a lot about the texts and the stories, but we can't ignore the visuals. The Ashmole Bestiary is famous for its art, but you mentioned earlier that some of the drawings are, well, off is a polite way to put it.
Off is generous in some cases.
Yeah.
They are wonderful, but they can be hilarious. You have to remember, the illuminators, the artists who painted these manuscripts, had almost certainly never seen a crocodile. They'd definitely never seen an elephant or a whale.
So they were just working from written descriptions.
Written descriptions, or maybe caressing other equally bad drawings. And that's how you get these fantastic images of crocodiles that look like, I don't know, hairy dogs with very long snouts and webbed feet. Or whales that look like giant scaly salmon with wolf teeth.
I've seen the one of the Bonnekan.
Ah, the Bonnekan. A mythical bull-like creature with curled horns that, no, it defends itself by firing flaming caustic dung at its pursuers for hundreds of feet.
And the drawing is incredible. It looks like a flamethrower. And the artist has drawn the hunter recoiling in disgust.
It's fantastic. But not everyone in the Middle Ages loved these kinds of pictures. There's a famous quote from St. Bernard of Clairvaux that is just scathing about this kind of art.
Oh, St. Bernard. He was the fun police of the 12th century, wasn't he?
Pretty much. He was a Cistercian. He was all about austerity. And he wrote this letter around 1125, complaining about the art he saw in the cloisters of other monasteries. He talks about that marvelous and deformed comeliness, that comely deformity.
Comely deformity. That's a great phrase. A beautiful ugliness.
It is. And he asked, essentially, why are we spending all this money on these unclean apes, these fierce lions, these monstrous centaurs, when we should be reading the Bible and helping the poor? He thought they were a frivolous distraction. He worried the monks were spending more time admiring the marble monsters than contemplating the law of God.
But clearly she lost that argument because the bestiaries became hugely popular.
He lost decisively. Because the visual language was just too powerful. It was too effective at teaching. And frankly, people just like the monsters. The human imagination craves the strange and the wonderful.
We still do. We still go to the zoo to see the lions and the elephants, not the sparrows and the pigeons.
Exactly the same impulse.
I want to zoom out a bit as we get near the end here. We've looked at the lion, the mermaid, the elephant, the unicorn. We've seen how these stories use sound, smell, and allegory. What does this all tell us about the people who made and read these books? What was their world like?
I think it tells us that they lived in a deeply resonant world.
Resonant how?
Everything echoed with meaning. In our modern scientific world, a thing is generally just a thing. A track in the mud is just a depression in the dirt caused by pressure. End of story. But for them, everything was a sign.
Nothing was mundane.
Nothing. A lion roaring wasn't just a biological noise for marking territory. It was a distant echo of the resurrection. A spider spinning a web wasn't just an insect catching its dinner. It was a tangible warning about the devil's subtle traps. The entire world was saturated with meaning.
It feels like the absolute opposite of nihilism.
It is the ultimate opposite. In the modern world, we often struggle with a sense of meaninglessness. We have all the facts, we know the DNA of the elephant, we know the physics of sound waves, but we're left asking, okay, but what does it all mean? For the medieval mind, the meaning was the primary thing. The fact was secondary.
And this focus on the sensory experience of the animal, that adds another layer, doesn't it? It suggests that they were trying to empathize with the animal, even if their science was completely wrong.
I think so. By imagining the distress of the fallen elephant or the sensory superiority of the lion, they were granting these animals a rich inner life. They were acknowledging that animals have agency, that they communicate, that they have families and social structures.
The text specifically mentions the elephants have a shared language of distress. That's a surprisingly modern ethological observation, even if the context is entirely mythical.
It is. It acknowledges that the human experience isn't the only experience that matters. The hunter doesn't hear the elephant's conversation. There are conversations happening all over nature that we are not part of and that are not for us.
That's a really humbling thought.
It is. And it connects back to the Ashmole manuscript itself. We know from studying it that it passed through many hands over the centuries. It wasn't just a museum piece locked away, it was used. It has corrections in the margins, edits, even little doodles. It was a living document.
It eventually ended up with Elias Ashmole in the 17th century, right? The guy who founded the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford.
Yes. And by then, the scientific revolution was getting underway. The Bestiary was shifting from being a book of truth to being a historical curiosity, an antique. But for the people who first made it and read it, it wasn't a history book. It was a guide to the universe.
So if we synthesize all of this, the Bestiary isn't a book of bad biology. It's a book of theology, of psychology, and of sensory exploration.
I think the source material puts it best. It calls it the world as a mirror. When they looked out at the animal kingdom, they saw reflections of their own souls, their own fears, in the face of God.
And the sound milieu concept we talked about, the idea of listening to the text, not just reading it, it reveals this world where animals have agency. They aren't just props in a human drama.
Exactly. The lion decides to hide its tracks. The mermaid chooses to sing her deadly song. The elephants decide to cry out for help. They are active participants in the cosmic drama.
It makes me look at the natural world a little differently. We usually talk about this idea of disenchantment, the idea that science stripped all the magic and meaning out of the world.
We traded meaning for accuracy. And look, we gained antibiotics and space travel and the internet, which is great. I do not want to go back to medieval dentistry. But we did lose that sense that the universe is constantly talking to us.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought for you to mull over.
If we were to write a bestiary of the 21st century, not a biology textbook, but a bestiary in the true medieval sense, where animals are allegories for our modern moral condition, what animals would we put in it? And what would they mean?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Think about it. What is the polar bear to us now? It's not just a large Arctic predator anymore. It's a symbol of fragility. It's an icon of our own destructive power over the climate. That image of a lone polar bear on a melting ice floe, that is our modern elephant with no knees. It's an image of helplessness that indicts the person looking at it.
What about the tardigrade, the water bear, a symbol of resilience in the face of apocalypse?
Or the lab rat, a symbol of silent sacrifice for human progress. Or the virus, the microscopic beast, a symbol of our terrifying interconnectedness and our own vulnerability. We're still making bestiaries. We just call them news reports or nature documentaries. We're still projecting our deepest anxieties and our moral beliefs onto the natural world.
We just stopped using gold leaf.
Sadly, yes. And we stopped smelling the parchment.
Well, next time you hear a lion roar at the zoo, or just your cat meow for its dinner, remember. And another time that sound might have been the voice of God, or a secret conversation you were never meant to hear.
Keep listening.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll catch you on the next one.